Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the actual clinical mechanics of addiction. We hear the word addiction tossed around all the time in our daily lives, right? But today we're going to move past the stigma, the social commentary, and the assumptions, and look strictly at the facts. We're breaking down exactly how clinical psychology defines, categorizes, and truly understands substance-related and addictive disorders.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how this question forces us to examine the fine line between our everyday, normal routines and actual maladaptive behaviors. I mean, we all have habits. We all have things we consume regularly. But at what exact point does a simple biological urge transform into a recognized psychological disorder that genuinely alters who you are? Well, let's look at the clinical criteria to find out.
Part 1. Defining addictive disorders.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that these disorders are defined by a failure in adaptation. We're not just talking about bad habits, we're talking about maladaptive behaviors that result from regular, consistent use of a substance. And the absolute key indicator? Profound change. The substance fundamentally alters the way a person thinks, the way they feel, and the way they behave. It literally rewires how they interact with the world around them.
And this brilliantly illustrates the dangerous universal cycle of addiction. According to clinical literature, this cycle basically has 3 distinct stages. First, the person develops a reliance on the substance just to help them face difficult situations. Second, the body adapts, and tolerance builds up. That means they actually need to consume greater amounts of the substance just to feel the same effects. And finally, if they try to stop, they get hit with severe withdrawal responses. It's a tragic loop, always moving from psychological reliance right into physiological tolerance and ending in withdrawal.
Part 2. Alcohol, the social toll.
The clinical texts really highlight that the impact of alcoholism doesn't just stop at the person drinking. It creates this massive, devastating ripple effect. It actively destroys families, social relationships, and careers. It's a huge threat to public safety, too, with intoxicated drivers causing severe road accidents. But honestly, perhaps the most tragic element noted in the research is the effect on the next generation. Children of individuals with this disorder suffer significantly higher rates of psychological problems. They're especially prone to anxiety, depression, phobias, and sadly, their own substance-related disorders down the line.
Part 3. Alcohol, the physical reality.
To really grasp this, it's vital to understand the biology. All alcoholic beverages contain a chemical called ethyl alcohol. When you take a drink, this chemical gets absorbed directly into the bloodstream and is carried straight to the central nervous system, meaning the brain and the spinal cord. And what does it do once it gets there? It depresses it. It slows down your functioning. Basically, alcohol is fundamentally a depressant.
Let's actually walk through this cascading sequence, because it happens in a very specific biological order. First, ethyl alcohol depresses the specific areas of the brain that control judgment and inhibition. This initially creates this feeling of false confidence, right? The user might become excessively talkative and super friendly. But as more alcohol is absorbed, the entire system degrades. Speech gets sloppy and less clear. Memory starts to falter. Sound judgment is completely lost, and emotions can suddenly become loud and aggressive. Finally, motor difficulties spike. We're talking unsteady walking, clumsiness, blurred vision, and a total inability to solve even simple problems or safely drive a car. So what starts as a boost of confidence rapidly degenerates into total physiological impairment.
Part 4. The extremes, heroin and cocaine.
Notice the stark contrast here. We have heroin on one side, which is an opioid, and cocaine on the other side, which is a stimulant. Heroin acts as a massive depressant, slowing down the respiratory centers in the brain so much that it can literally paralyze breathing. Cocaine, on the flip side, totally accelerates the system. It leads to a state of constant intoxication that eventually just burns the user out, resulting in extreme fatigue and severe anxiety.
Let's look a little closer at heroin. With this opioid, the dependency becomes so absolute that the user's entire existence just revolves around the substance. They build up an extreme tolerance, which means they constantly, always need more of it. And if they try to stop, the withdrawal reaction is absolutely agonizing. But the most direct, immediate danger of heroin abuse is overdose, because it targets the brain's respiratory centers, and overdose literally paralyzes the user's ability to breathe, frequently causing death. It's incredibly dangerous.
Conversely, look at how cocaine operates. Regular use can trap a person in a pattern where they are intoxicated throughout the entire day. This constant hyperstimulation heavily impairs short-term memory and attention. The drug completely dominates their life, leading to terrible functioning at work and destroying social relationships. And the crash when they try to stop, it's brutal. They face deep depression, fatigue, sleep problems, irritability, and severe anxiety. They get locked into a cycle of needing more and more of the stimulant just to function normally.
Part 5. The broad spectrum of substances.
This clinical categorization brilliantly shows the sheer variety of abuse substances out there. Sure, you see stimulants like cocaine and hallucinogens like LSD, but take a close look at the opioids category. Right there, next to heroin and morphine, you find everyday painkillers and even cough syrup. Look at sedatives. Common sleeping pills and anti-anxiety meds are on the list. And under inhalants, we're looking at standard, everyday household items: gasoline, paint thinners, and glue. The potential for maladaptive substance abuse is literally sitting right now in our medicine cabinets and our garages.
And honestly, you might be a little shocked to see what else actually makes the official DSM-5 list of commonly abused substances. I mean, alongside the obvious ones like alcohol, tobacco, and cannabis, the clinical manual explicitly lists caffeine. Yes, that includes your morning coffee, your afternoon tea, caffeinated soda, and believe it or not, even chocolate and cocoa.
So I'm going to leave you with this thought to reflect on. We started this explainer by asking when a habit becomes a disorder. Based on the clinical mechanics of psychological reliance, building physical tolerance, and experiencing withdrawal that we've just unpacked together, how many of our perfectly socially acceptable habits, like that mandatory morning cup of coffee or that evening piece of chocolate, are actually a lot closer to the clinical definition of a substance disorder than we'd ever like to admit? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the world around you.